Ever feel like someone took the idea of order a bit too far when creating the universe?
Interesting thought.
Well, today we're going to explore that feeling. We're diving into William Blake's The Book of Urizen. It's his own creation myth.
Oh, Urizen. A fascinating choice. Really gets you thinking.
It does. And get this, we're looking at the Lessing J. Rosenwald copy from 1818.
Wow, the one with all the hand-painted details.
The very same. Blake actually refined those over decades. This copy gives us a glimpse into how his ideas evolved, like we're peeking right over his shoulder.
I love that. Okay, so for those unfamiliar, what's the Book of Urizen all about?
Well, imagine rebellious gods, a world kind of steeped in sorrow, and, well, let's just say Blake's idea of hope was a bit unorthodox.
Yeah, you got those classic Blakean elements for sure. But he wasn't just telling a fantastical tale, was he? He used these grand narratives to grapple with real issues of his time, issues that still resonate centuries later.
Absolutely. So, who is this Urizen character anyway? What's he all about?
Picture a god obsessed with reason.
Okay, reason, got it.
But not the good kind, not the kind that sparks joy or wonder. This is reason taken to an extreme, the kind that measures and defines every single thing. It's like the Enlightenment, but with a dark twist. And for Blake, that dark side was essential.
So not your typical benevolent creator deity then?
No, not at all. I mean, he calls Urizen's creation, get this, a dungeon-like heaven. How's that for a contradiction?
Whoa, that's pretty bleak. Makes you wonder what kind of world we'd end up with if we were in charge, huh?
Right. Makes you think. But Blake doesn't stop there. He shows us that even in this rigid, reason-dominated world, there's pushback, rebellion brewing.
Oh. And who's leading the charge?
That would be Lawson Enitharmon.
Are Adam and Eve stand-ins, or?
Not quite. Think of them as embodying everything Urizen tries to suppress. Loss represents imagination, creativity, that raw spark. He's horrified by the sterile order Urizen imposes.
And Enitharmon, what does she represent?
Enitharmon embodies pity, compassion, those more empathetic qualities that get lost in Urizen's drive for control.
Got it. So we've got the uptight rulemaker and the forces of feeling and imagination. Recipe for a classic showdown, right?
You got it. And then, right into this already tense situation, enters their child Orc.
Orc, all right. So, what's so special about this kid?
Well, he's not exactly your average newborn. See, Orc isn't born a bouncing baby. Picture a fiery serpent bursting onto the scene.
Talk about making an entrance. What's the symbolism there? Why a fiery serpent?
Orc represents raw energy, pure, untamed potential for change. He embodies everything Urizen fears and tries to contain. And it's no surprise that Urizen ends up trying to chain him down.
Even in a cosmic creation myth, that struggle for freedom feels relatable, doesn't it? Like when you have a great idea, but the world just isn't ready for it yet.
You've hit on something important there. Because Blake isn't just writing about these abstract forces, these gods and monsters. He's using them to explore these very human experiences.
I can see that.
Those times you feel your own creativity, your desire for change, stifled or dismissed. That's Orc chained on that mountain.
So, Urizen, he's got his big plan, but it doesn't sound like there's much room for, happiness and free expression and all that. What happens to a world built on such rigid control?
It's definitely not a recipe for sunshine and rainbows, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Blake describes a world steeped in sorrow.
Sorrow, yeah.
It's populated by what he calls sons and daughters of sorrow, figures with names like Thiriel, Utha, Grodna, Fuzon.
Wow, okay. Not exactly names you hear every day. Who are these folks? What's the deal with these names?
Well, think of them as representing different facets of the human experience. Each name, it points to a quality, that potential that's been stifled by Urizen's system, his overemphasis on reason.
So it's not just Orc who's feeling the squeeze. Urizen's whole creation is feeling the weight of this grand design.
Exactly. And remember that line about Urizen casting a net of religion? This is Blake, at his most provocative, pushing us to ask, is organized religion just another form of control in this world?
It's a good question. And it makes you wonder if Blake himself felt trapped by the expectations of his own time. It wasn't exactly encouraged, was it, to be a radical free-thinking artist back then?
Interesting connection. And think about it. Blake was creating these works by hand. I mean, talk about meticulous detail.
Oh, absolutely. Even in this digital archive, you get a sense of it. Every stroke, every color choice, so deliberate. This wasn't some mass-produced book.
Right. This was a labor of love, maybe even a little bit of wrestling with these ideas. This tension between control and freedom in his own creative process.
I like that. And, that's what I find so striking even looking at this digital copy. It's like, yeah, the themes are dark, but the work itself is incredibly beautiful. Absolutely.
The colors, especially that orange ink Blake used, it's almost jarring. It's like amidst all this darkness, there's this burst of vibrancy.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. The beauty doesn't erase the suffering. It coexists with it. And that, I think, is crucial to Blake's vision. It's about recognizing that complexity, those contrasting forces, light and darkness, control and freedom, even within the darkest moments. There's that potential for something more.
Potential, like looking for wildflowers pushing up through cracks in the pavement.
Yeah.
Resilience, even when things are tough. It's that idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
That even when things are tough, there's still that potential for beauty, for something more.
Exactly. And, that's where those hand-painted details in this copy of Urizen really hit home.
They do.
The way Blake uses color, line, form, it's not just decoration.
That's deliberate. It's another way to give those contrasting forces life, light and darkness, control and freedom.
Like we were saying earlier, even with the dark themes, the work itself is incredibly beautiful.
Right, and it's all those details working together.
We've talked about the orange ink, but even those really fine lines, especially around figures like Enitharmon, they almost seem to vibrate.
Exactly. It's like he's capturing something essential about those figures, the way they resist that rigid structure Urizen represents. And we can't forget, Blake wasn't just a poet, he was a visual artist, an engraver. He knew the power of those subtle details.
Which is why seeing this specific copy, the Lessing J. Rosenwald, is so remarkable. It's like holding a piece of his creative process, that evolution from those first sketches to this incredibly detailed final product.
It's a good reminder that even these grand myths, these explorations of human nature, they started with someone putting pen to paper, or a brush to copper plate in this case.
It's pretty amazing. And centuries later, those very marks still spark these conversations, make us question, make us feel.
Absolutely. And, it all comes back to that idea of hope, that resilience. Even when the world, or maybe even ourselves, tries to box us in, there's always that potential for something more.
It's a powerful thought. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Blake's Book of Urizen, what's the one thing you hope our listener really takes away from this work?
That's a tough one. There's so much here. But I guess if I had to choose, it'd be that the world isn't black and white. Things are rarely so simple, are they? There's always that complexity, those opposing forces at play. And, rather than trying to erase that tension, maybe the real work, the challenge, is learning to hold those opposing ideas in balance.
To be comfortable with the uncertainty, the unknown.
Exactly. Because within that space, those contradictions, that's where creativity, true change emerges. It's like work. Eventually breaking free from those chains, that potential is always there, simmering beneath the surface.
It's a hopeful way to see it, even amidst the sorrow and darkness.
It is. And maybe those are the best kinds of journeys, the ones that leave you with more questions than answers.
I like that. The journeys that leave us with more to ponder.
The ones that renew that sense of wonder about the world, our place in it.
Beautifully said. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into William Blake's The Book of Urizen. We hope you enjoyed exploring this complex and captivating work with us today.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
And to our listener, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and never underestimate the power of a little imagination. It just might shake things up.